We are ready to go. First of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Letha Filderman. I'm the president of PopTech. I'm really delighted to ask Sarah to say a little welcome from our colleagues at N Square. So Sarah, please say hello to everybody and welcome.
Thank you, Letha. Well, hello, everyone. As Letha mentioned, I'm Sarah Kuchesfahani. I am the director of the N Square DC Hub. On behalf of N Square, we're really delighted that you could all join us today. I think we're going to have a really fascinating conversation with friends, old and new. And what you're going to hear, the intersectionality of the topics that are going to be discussed, really speaks to the heart of the work that we do here at N Square. And it also solidifies the wonderful collaboration we share with Letha. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'd also like to say that, our work with N Square goes back for about 5 years now, I think. And it has really been an amazing journey. I would say for both of our organizations and all of the little orbits we've created as a result. I'd like to turn it over to Moran to take us on the journey we're about to embark on today.
I think that we should launch straight into the first part of the afternoon, which is a fantastic panel of 3 amazing speakers. In doing so, we hope that you're going to get some fascinating insights into the thinking of 3 extraordinary people that together will give different perspective as to where the world is right now and where is it heading. So I'm going to turn it quickly to Beatrice Fihn, who spoke at 2018 at PopTech. She is the executive director of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapon, known as ICAN, and the winner of the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize. To Maurice Mitchell, who is the head of the Working Families Party and a speaker on various topics that are in the news right now in the US, primarily with respect to organization around the coming election, but also around civil movement that and that calls for a lot of attention from various domains. And to Phillip Agnew, is the co-founder of the Dream Defenders and also one of the voices that were said to be the leading voices of our generation and one of the 100 most influential African Americans in the nation. So with that, I'm going to turn it to the 3 of you to take the conversation and lead us in the next session.
Thank you very much, Moran, and thank you, Letha, everyone who had a hand in bringing us together this afternoon, evening, maybe morning for some of you. I know PopTech is a worldwide affair. So for everybody that joined us from wherever you are, I want to thank you all for coming. And I really am honored and very excited about the opportunity to moderate this conversation between 2 people who I look up to greatly. I've had the opportunity to now talk to Beatrice on a number of occasions, and I've known Maurice for a long time. In fact, Maurice was a mentor for my 2019 talk. And so these are 2 people who are doing incredible work. PopTech welcomed them because they are skilled communicators, they are brilliant thinkers, they are creative, and they care about people. And this is a year where those qualities are needed more than ever, maybe the last one more than any of them, that we care for one another, that we care about people. We know that this disease has totally upended our lives in a variety of different ways. We now are relegated to small Brady Bunch boxes every single day for hours upon hours upon hours, whereas we will be in rooms and we'll be enjoying the best of food. I am making ravioli far more than I would like. Our lives are dramatically different. And every day we're faced with the human toll of one of the first events in our lifetime that we all experience together across the world. But it's not all bad. It's not all bad. And I know that may feel uncomfortable, especially for those of us who are privileged to frankly still be alive or still have health care, still have a place to stay, still have income coming in. It maybe feels a little bit guilty to say that everything isn't going to shit. And there are some incredible opportunities right now. And that's what we're here to talk about. The name of our panel today is What a Time to Be Alive. What a time to be alive. There are a myriad ways to die in this world. Sounds very morbid, but you could die from cancer, you could die from unemployment and poverty, but we're here. And so while we are living, we have a duty and a responsibility and really a blessing to transform this world for our children and our grandchildren. And these two people on this panel are doing it already. And so I'm very excited to get into our first question. Both of you all's talks, I wasn't able to join the 2018 PopTech, but I had the opportunity to listen to both of you all's talks, and they were incredible. But one thing really stood out to me was the level of synergy in both of you all's talks. Both of you all, ostensibly are in completely different fields. Maurice is working in the political field that in the US, but with worldwide implications. And you, Beatrice, are working Nobel Peace Prize winner, working to end nuclear proliferation with absolutely worldwide ramifications. But you all had remarkably similar outlooks on the world and the social movements that actually changed the world. One crazy synergy that you all had, almost to a T, the language was almost to a T, was the power of social movements to render the invisible visible. I'm going to say that again, to render the invisible visible. So my first question for both of you all, so now we're 2 years removed, almost to the day, as we heard from Letha, from your PopTech 2018 talks, and in a completely different world. How do you see social movements making the invisible visible today? And Beatrice, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Phil, and thank you, Letha and Sarah, Moran, and all of the PopTech community. It's really, really nice to be here and see so many of you. Yeah, what a time to be alive, huh? I mean, it's such a good title because I think that that's what we kind of feel every day when we maybe try to look at the news or maybe look away from the news a little bit. But I do think that there's just, since, we talked 2 years ago, I do think that social movements have just sort of increased in power and increased in sort of this huge force. This year, aside from the pandemic, we've seen Black Lives Matter going to sort of just really kind of level up. It was there before, obviously, but it really has kind of confronted the whole world. We see that in Nigeria right now. Across the whole world, there was marches here in Switzerland. So it really changed a lot. I've seen the climate change movement, coming sort of head to head with politicians and sort of kind of being at this kind of stage of confrontation. And it can feel incredibly challenging and negative and awful, and like things are going in the wrong direction. But I also see so much more energy. And that people are understanding and like feeling that, okay, no one's coming to save us. We're just gonna have to kind of roll up our sleeves and do this ourselves. And I think that that's something that I think we have to understand. There's been a lot of, watching the US from outside the US, I see this whole like vote, which is of course very important. But I think people are understanding also that that's just one thing, right? That's just one action we're taking. It's depending on how long the queues are, but it's something that shouldn't be taking that much time. But there's so much more to social movements and change, and the change doesn't happen on election day. And nobody, whoever we vote for, is just not going to come and save us. But really, that there's this kind of awareness that we're going to have to look at the issues and look at the problems from so many angles and so many directions, and there's so many things to do. So I also, when things are bad, you can feel overwhelmed, but also a huge sense of opportunity, that there is not just a lot of different causes, but also different methods, and you can see people are working constantly on doing things. And that's something that I think we maybe also in the social movements have to be better at highlighting and lifting up, because I think that I've been thinking a lot about it lately, that in social movements there's so much obsession about, are we winning or losing? Did we win this cause or did we lose this cause? And you don't win or lose, like, ever. It's just you're moving forward, so you're moving backwards constantly. There's no end goal, really. It's just constantly moving. So it's trying to also kind of, I think that we're seeing how people are kind of understanding that the whole Me Too movement or climate, it's not something you just check. Black Lives Matter, you don't check. Great, we did something, it's done. It's a constant process on all levels and all issues that we're going to have to engage for the long term, and it's a part of life, these movements. And I do feel people are starting to understand that this is kind of ongoing. It's not ending. It's just, and it can feel draining, but it's also exciting.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And one thing in talking to you from the time that we met, you have a very, your notion of the spirit of human beings and the capacity of the spirit of human beings to transform the world is incredible, but it's also very scientific, right? That energy that you're talking about doesn't just go anywhere. And that's what I like about that concept of winning and losing. It doesn't just dissipate, it transforms, it catalyzes something, it moves, and it takes on a different form. And so, yes, that really resonates. So thank you for that. Maurice, how are you? Listen, me and Maurice have stories upon stories. Time doesn't allow us to go into it, but Brother Mo, it's hard. I'm calling you Maurice. Mo, how are social movements making the invisible visible? Or is there a part of what Beatrice said that resonates with you?
Absolutely. And also, before I get started, thank you, my brother Phil. Thank you, Beatrice, for just participating in this dialogue with me. Thank you, Letha, Ron, the whole PopTech team. So where do I begin? So I do want to sort of build upon what you shared, Beatrice, the fact that there's all of this activity taking place, right? And I think I've heard popularly how people have described 2020 in this sort of mystical way. And I want to kind of like demystify it a little bit, So we are at the tail end of decades of this sort of neoliberal consensus, right? Where all the leaders of most of the countries that we're calling and zooming from, in many of the parties, like both Republicans and Democrats in the United States, just kind of agreed on this basic idea of how our economy, our global economy, was going to run. Just sort of agreed with the further and further financialization of all of our economies and the drawing of resources from everyday people to a very small number of people and to corporations, which has led all around the world to the corporate capture of our governments, right? And all of the governments that we are calling from are at different stages of corporate capture, right? And so it makes a lot of sense that so many people are feeling dislocated, dissatisfied, underappreciated, under-resourced. So many people around the world in these various movements. So it's not surprising that in the summer of 2020 that we had this uprising. And then there's another uprising taking place in Nigeria. And it's also not surprising that we're experiencing intersecting crises, right? So we're experiencing the climate crisis. The data, the science was there for decades, right? The political will has not been there. And there's a direct relationship between the political will and the corporate capture of our governments, especially the government of the United States. So when you see a crisis and you don't take action, that crisis naturally exacerbates. So now we're at 2020, and there's consensus opinion that if we don't take dramatic global action on climate, that we're going to experience a global calamity, right? And so the scale of the intervention that we have to make around climate is commiserate with the scale of the crisis and the scale of the racial justice crisis that we're experiencing experiencing is commiserate with the decades and generations of a lack of a serious intervention around the condition of Black lives. And there's certain themes that are operating with all of these crises. So the disinvestment from everyday people and the investment in things like jails, prisons, things that divide us, the investment in products that accumulate profit and wealth versus the investment in sort of spaces in order to maximize human potential. Over decades and decades and decades, we couldn't prefigure that these crises would happen in 2020, but certainly we could have prefigured that a crisis was mounting. If it wasn't 2020, it would have been 2021. And the other thing is that under capitalism, because of the cyclical nature of capitalism, crisis is actually part of it, right? So in some ways, we shouldn't be surprised when these crises happen and when they exacerbate and when they grow and when they intensify. And we have these certain rules, right? We're not supposed to touch our economic system. We're not supposed to touch our political system. We just accept them for how they are. And we sort of look at our economy as this thing apart from us. But what is the economy but how we exchange with one another, how we interact with one another, how we organize our society? And I think what's happening right now, speaking to making the invisible visible, is that, to your point, Beatrice, so many people are saying nobody's going to come here to save us, because the leadership, the corporate leadership, the political leadership, the systems that many people felt would always sort of support us, would always be there, would always be stewards of our societies, they've been discredited to the point where there's a crisis of legitimacy when it comes to our leadership. And there's two directions we could take. Because of that crisis of legitimacy, people are feeling a sense of anxiety. People are feeling a sense of fear. People are feeling a sense of just sort of bewilderment. And either our social movements, which is all of us coming together in order to solve those problems, could fill that gap, or, and this is also happening at the same time, those that want to divide us, the far right, racist, white supremacist, ethno-nationalist, those forces could come in and create a story that is easy to understand about who's the winners, who's the losers, who's the enemy, who's the in group, at a moment when political leadership, corporate leadership, and our systems have failed, are collapsing, and people are asking meaningful questions around who will save us. We either will come together and look to one another in order to figure out what the saving looks like, or we will look to one another as the threat. And that is, to me, the binary question operating in our politics and operating in the ground, not just in the United States, but in Europe, in a lot of places, right? We have this choice of we either could turn to one another or turn against one another when we've realized that the systems, that the leadership, that many of us were taught would always be there and support us and steward all of these resources, when we've realized that they're actually bankrupt. The one last thing I'll say, in the United States, one of the stories of the past few years that I really appreciated was this story about wealthy people and famous people and them getting caught trying to sort of get their children into Ivy League schools using their money and connections. What I loved about that was that exposed the mediocrity of the elite, right? In a way that I think could be really generative. I actually think it's important for everyday people to understand that the hierarchies that exist aren't meritocracies. People at the top of the hierarchies aren't there because they're somehow better, they're somehow naturally superior, that they are using the levers of an unfair system in order to serve them and to calcify the power that they have to determine that they maintain power and everyday people don't. And that simply going to Ivy League school is not a marker of your brilliance. It's a marker of your ability to move the machinations of this caste system. And so many people saw that. many things like that happen over the past 2 years. And that creates an opening for more people to engage civil society in ways that I think could be really powerful. But on the flip side, it also creates an opening for authoritarians and others to be able to take advantage of the fact that people are questioning so many things, including their leadership.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You see, this is why we are doing this, because we have this brilliance, and this is a moment that gives us the opportunity to sit and learn from one another. And I'm learning a lot from both of you. Going back to both of your talks, another synergy that you had, and you started to dovetail right into this smoothly, Mo, is the opportunities that we're talking about. So for this next question, we have about 9 minutes. For this next question, I want to drill in on one of your other themes, shared themes from your talks. The making once impossible things more possible, once impossible thoughts more possible. You know, they say it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism for some people, right? This realism, this thought, you brought it up, both of you, that capitalism, our financial systems, our political systems, our social constructs are deigned by God, right? And that we have no control, but there are people actually using this system against us, and there are people who are going to change it, and you're examples of that. And so, Beatrice, Maurice, what are some things that maybe because of or despite COVID that were once thought to be impossible seem very possible in this moment? And be as specific as you can, because I know PopTech folks are going to take notes and make it possible tomorrow.
I mean, I find it, you know, it's easier to envisage the end of the world than end of capitalism. And the same thing is easier to envisage the end of the world than end of nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. I mean, people talk about that as sort of, you know, press the button or not, but, you know, that would be likelier than actually getting rid of them. And I think that what we need to realize is that things aren't the way they are just because they are like that. Like, people make it like this. Every day people take decisions to maintain the structure that we have and to uphold the kind of injustice and unfairness and the oppression of people. And it's, you know, we sometimes look at structures as something unpersonal, and that it's just people, it's just like that. There's just nuclear weapons. It's just, you know, some people are rich, some people are poor. It's just like that. Not acknowledging that people, regular people like you and I, are just taking decisions daily to keep it that way. And that's almost like a law of nature that nuclear weapons exist, or law of nature that billionaires exist, or, you know, that law of nature that kids are starving in you know, some of the richest countries in the world, that's just normal and natural. It's not. So I think that the pandemic kind of, you know, when there's a shock to the system, you know, I think that people are starting to question things. People have questioned healthcare systems, employment laws, for example. I can get very frustrated sometimes with how we get sucked into conversations about masks or no masks. Like that's you know, what we need to talk about, you know, who has access to healthcare, yeah. Who has do we get sick leave in our workplaces? Do we can we go to the doctor? Can we call in sick and still get, you know, unemployment benefits if we lose our jobs? And those kind of things that I feel like so many of the kind of capitalist structures, for example, in this pandemic just kind of hid and again blame people for not wearing masks. And I'm not saying that you should that you shouldn't wear masks. I'm not arguing that, of course, but more like that it becomes again this kind of focus on, you know, not challenging the people that maintain the system the way it is. So in terms of, you know, the opportunities, first, I really do think that what we've seen is that the kind of macho leader style, the threatful Trump, Putin, Bolsonaro style of leadership does not protect people when it actually comes down to a crisis. Like, who do you want as your leader when there's a global pandemic? Do you want a leader that is empathetic and prioritize taking care of people, or do you want someone who kind of threatens and brags and kind of have that sort of attitude. I mean, I think we've seen very clearly which countries have handled this better and which countries also have the support of its populations. I mean, for example, I'm Swedish, in a country like Sweden, it's been a very international kind of debate about the Swedish way of handling COVID, and they've handled it quite different. But the kind of approach to the pandemic has been like a very empathetic, and they've talked to people, and there's a lot of support to see how the New Zealand government, for example, handled this, and how other governments around the world have handled it. And then you compare that to Russia, United States, UK. I mean, it's not a coincidence that these are also some of the biggest nuclear armed states.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I mean, I'm not saying that they are handled COVID worse because they're nuclear armed states, but it's also the mentality about how do you address threats, how do you protect your people, and same thing with the kind of the issue of police brutalities. People are, I see this as such an opportunity when people are starting to really question the structures that the powerful say protect us aren't actually protecting us. They're actually harming us. And when we talk about protection, when we talk about safety, what is it that we really mean? Do we mean, healthcare, or do we mean police that might shoot people, or do we mean nuclear weapons that harm people? So I do see a huge opportunity to sort of start really understanding that things aren't the way they are just because they're like that naturally, and people made it this way, and we can unmake it.
In our final minutes, yes. So this idea of rendering the impossible possible, and I think both of you could speak to this. It's actually not something that happens gradually. It's not like an idea goes from being impossible to slightly more possible to 15%, a little bit more possible. What I've experienced is that ideas go from being not possible, not viable, like crazy, to dramatically becoming very, very possible through social movements, right? And what that allows me to understand is that the idea of the possible is not rigid, right? It's actually up to us. It's dynamic, and we could shift the window of the possible through our activity, right? So this conversation around defunding the police, I've been involved in the prison abolition movement for a very long time, since like the early 2000s. And, a lot of scholars and a lot of organizers like Miriam Kaba, Dr. Angela Davis, Ruth Gilmore, really created this construct to understand, right, the fact that we were being disinvested from, and these systems of social control were being invested by our government. And it was in academic circles and left circles and in very niche circles. It wasn't taken seriously as a piece of public policy. And then this movement took off in response to the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and it's in the center of debate. It's on the debate stage where the presidential candidates are debating prison abolition. That happened like that, right? And so to me, what's empowering about that is that if we let go of the impossible and possible, and we set a North Star on just focusing on our values and the things we actually think are necessary to fully realize human potential, think about how you operate in the world. Think about how you look at problems when you're disabused from the possible, the rigid idea of the possible and impossible. And you understand even the possible and impossible are subject to our activity and our ability to make meaning together. To me, it's very empowering. And for all of those, especially young Black folks around the country that participated in that, they collectively participated in transforming the impossible, right? Think about what that does to an individual and how they look at the world and whether or not they're an agent or subject of change, right? And so it's almost magical what social movements are able to do to individuals and are able to do collectively to our ability to think that shifts could actually happen. The last thing in the last, I guess, minute I have, COVID-19 has been a collective trauma, a global collective trauma, where our economic system has collapsed, our healthcare system has collapsed. And so now, popularly, so many things have been discredited. This idea that healthcare is a commodity, that's out the window, right? We know that healthcare is not only a right, it's a collective need. And this idea that there's some people who should get healthcare and other people shouldn't get healthcare, that's out the window during COVID-19, because if there's an undocumented immigrant who has COVID-19 in my community, I better make sure that that undocumented immigrant has healthcare, because that person not having healthcare can endanger the healthcare of me, my family, everybody in my community. Whether or not I like that person is immaterial to the fact that everybody needs quality healthcare, and we need a global health system that can ensure that everybody is safe. Somebody living in China or the west coast of Africa, if they're ill and they get on a plane, that could dramatically impact the well-being of people all over the world. So much of the logic of COVID challenges the logic that we've been imprisoned by of neoliberalism, and it creates an opening for us to realize that so many things might be possible. The fact that our government spent trillions of dollars to prop up the economy, once, twice, 3 times, that shows us that yes, when governments have the political will, they can print money, right? So this idea that we don't have the money for this, or we can't afford that, that's out the window. So now that we realize that if we have the political will, we can marshal our resources. Think about the things that we could solve for if we decided that we deserve to solve for it and that we have the urgency to solve for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It is very big, but we're up for the task. And what you're all talking about is that, social movements and this catalyzing effect that they have, and it's a cycle. People encourage, move together, create this catalyzing effect. And one of the things I learned, I studied a little bit, but one of the things I learned about catalysts is that they create, or they spark, chemical reactions. But through that chemical reaction, what makes something a catalyst is it's able to retain its physical properties through and during the reaction. And so there's this cycle of I'm giving all of my energy to you as an individual, as a collective, and how those social movements then transform other people, and those people continue to do it. And so it doesn't die. The dream still lives on, but it's not destiny either. Human beings have to make these things happen. So thank you all for that. We're going to now go to some breakout groups to have a conversation amongst each other, and the tech wizards behind the curtain of Zoom are going to break us out into groups. But I have a prompt for you all, and that prompt I am going to type here in the chat. The chat has also been way more quiet than most Zooms I've been on. But if you could see it in the chat here, we're all becoming more acquainted with new normals, including this new socially distant world. What is one way beyond Zoom, video conferencing, or social media that you are staying connected to yourself and other people? And how can you contribute to making a new world possible? This is important because no movements happen without connections between people. I see the only question that I did see is this one around organizations or individuals. My posture generally is that you should be following organizations. If an individual does not and has not spent the time to nurture and develop, or at least build some sort of relationship and accountability to an organization, I think that may be a shortcoming. Now it depends. I think there are incredible scholars, incredible academics, incredible people who are incredible communicators, who are important, but organizations I'm going to offer organizations. The Movement for Black Lives in the U.S. Is an incredible organization. Working Families Party. I know Mo is already going to say it, but I'll say it for you. I co-founded an organization called Dream Defenders. Another, the one that I'm working on now, Black Men Build. There are, Democracy Now! As a media organization is an incredible one. I'll stop there. I think you all probably have way more than me, but those are a few.
Yeah, just want to add, I think one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is the kind of how activism has become marketable and part of almost also kind of capitalist culture, and people have kind of it becomes a way to sell things. And in a way, you know, it's a sign of the effectiveness of certain movements, that, you know, people feel like it's in their interest to be a part of it. We work a lot with, like, you know, be on the right side of history and that kind of slogans that you want to feel like you're on the right side. But I do also kind of worry a little bit about the, you know, the social media. We talked a little bit about this in the breakout group, a little bit on sort of the social media part of activism. And I love social media. I think it can be extremely useful for activism, but it's also a lot of just putting out things that gets attention, but it's not connected to any kind of deeper work to actually achieve the change. So I do also believe very strongly in organization. And I understand how it is so less exciting and you know, to follow an organization and to follow an individual, but you also have these individuals then that are, again, like becoming the answer to all of our problems, and they aren't, like, and I also feel like I want to tie into a little bit to Lita's questions about how to sustain the energy of social movements. And I think that is through working in organizations, or as we talked in our group, communities. It doesn't have to be a formal organization, it can also be communities, because that is how you sustain energy over time, by also making this a part of your daily life and your regular work, rather than just this idea that, you know, I'm going to write this very strongly worded post on social media and use the right hashtag, and then change is going to come. That's not really how it works. So I really do like this kind of idea that we, you know, it's long-term work and it has to be organizations. And obviously on the nuclear weapons issue, you know, there's loads of them that are here on the call, and ICANN, of course, is working very hard on this. That is really trying to build this kind of broad movement, and long-term movement where you can be a part of, and you can have fun, and you can, even if it's a very depressing issue with nuclear weapons, you can sort of build a friendship and communities in order to sustain it for a long time. And I think that that's really the key. You know, the people that I met in this work are some of my best friends today. And that has made it like bearable to talk about, you know, nuclear war and the end of humanity, and, you know, to listen to stories from survivors in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and nuclear test communities that have been bombed by, you know, governments and tested like guinea pigs. So I think that, you know, really, you know, try to kind of find your community and work together with people in an organization or a community for the long term.
Yeah, to that point, the thing that I would add is that participation in social movements it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And, you know, to lead this point, which Phil elevated, it's not really about winning or losing, right? So when all of the work that I'm involved in, like the scale of the problem is immense. You know, everything is always stacked against us. And so I'm not getting involved because we're assured victory, right? It's, to me, what brings me to movement is a choice about who I want to be with, who I want to be on this journey with, which side I want to be on, when there's clearly a set of forces that are interested in maintaining systems of oppression. I'm not assured victory in my lifetime. That's not why I'm committed to movement. I'm deciding who I want to struggle with, who I want to make connections with, and which forces I want to challenge while I have these like 8, 9, 10 decades on Earth. That's why I'm involved in movement, not because I'm assured victory. And I think the thing, you know, you talked about the fatigue aspect of it. I think our movements could be very exciting, could be very pleasurable, could be spaces with a lot of joy. And I think the way that our movements grow is when we're intentional and we make sure that there's joy. We ensure that people feel safe. We ensure that we don't do, we're not just like the negative sort of reflection of the people that we're quote unquote opposed to, that we don't do to them what they did to us, so that we don't create an in group and an out group, that we're inviting, that we're irresistible, right? It's actually, there's work that we could do in our movements so that happens. So even though we're working on heady things like nuclear proliferation or challenging racism, when you're in that movement, you feel alive, you feel connected. And that, as a person, is what makes it a pleasurable journey, even though the work that we're doing is to, challenge bullies, right? It's about being intentional about the culture and the values that you imbue in the movement.
Yeah, one of our comrades, Mary Hooks, she has something that she calls the mandate, and she says, it is our duty to avenge the suffering of our ancestors, right? But one of the lines in there that I love is that to be transformed in the service of the work. And I think that's what we're saying. And I think it's maybe borderline corny to keep going back to this chemistry thing, but it just is really on my mind really heavily. And I think that is how you avoid the burnout, right? Is that you are fed. You're supposed to be fed, and we're supposed to be building organizations that feed and transform us and allow us and propel us to evolve. I've changed my name 2 times. I've changed my hair, and a lot of this stuff maybe seems cosmetic, but it's my kind of physical reflection of what the movement has done for me and done to me, and changed our way of being. There's a great question in here that I want to elevate from Marina Robinson Snowden, who is a rocket scientist and a FAMUan. The question is for you, Beatrice. Do you think that the nuclear community, at least as it stands now, is humble enough? And if it is, how, have you seen it, to effectively coalition build, to acknowledge that the nuclear crisis is an existential threat to others, not the existential threat, the only?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think that the nuclear community absolutely hasn't been able to do that before. There's been sort of almost a desperation in the kind of fact that people forgot about nuclear weapons. And a lot of people who worked on this issue for a long time has kind of, still talk about the 80s and the big giant marches through New York and millions of people. And if only people would do that again, and why are they not? And they must be like ignorant people. People are ignorant. And I don't see it like that. And I think that that's a very bad framing. And the tendency from people like that, and we have a lot of them in ICANN as well. It's not, the tendency from people like that is then to kind of try to bolster the significance of this issue, like, this is the worst issue of them all, and if there's nuclear war, we all die, and which is true in a way, but you can't say that to people that are fighting for their lives daily, and you can't say that my issue is more important than your issue. And I think that these are the conversations we had also around the marches for Black Lives, for example, when people say you shouldn't be marching because of COVID, like you should stay home. You can't say that my security concern is more important than your security concern. You have to listen to people. So I really do think that the nuclear community have to be a little bit more humble. I've seen a lot of attempts to sort of, we need to build bridges with when the climate change movement has its huge marches, we need to make connections. So climate change people, come to our movement. And then Black Lives Matter, well, we're also anti-racist, so come to our nuclear weapons movement. And it doesn't work like that. And people see through it. Like I see through it on other movements, so people will do it. So I think you have to build genuine connections, and it has to be slow and honest, and it has to be also that the nuclear community has to offer something to other movements, and show that this is not something that you do just to get support for your own cause, but that you really are there for other causes. We talk a lot about the intersectionality between different issues, not in an attempt to kind of distract people from fighting for climate change or to stop climate change, or to sort of protect Black lives, like, right? But it's more sort of like we see the links, and this is about white supremacy. This is about this kind of masculine ideas of power. This is about who gets to decide in the world. This is about, you know, colonialism and oppression of people and indigenous communities. Like, we see the connection, but it doesn't mean that we have to go in and sort of take over things. And I think that's really, really important. And I think that a lot of the nuclear community have to really reflect very hard on that. And also think, you know, if people aren't paying attention to this issue, sort of how can we genuinely raise awareness in this issue in a way that people have the mindset to do? Maybe it's not, maybe we don't need everyone to march in the way that they did in the 80s. Maybe that time for the nuclear weapons issue is over. It doesn't mean that we aren't making progress. Our campaign is making progress. We're doing huge victories, but we're just doing it another way, and we're connecting with these other issues and trying to approach it in a different way. So I think it's definitely something we need to continue to talk to. And for me, having conversations like this is about building those connections. And PopTech has been a great place for that.
It absolutely has. And I want to thank you all for the opportunity to help guide this conversation this evening, afternoon, I don't know, morning, maybe for someone. And that's what these conversations are exactly about. But Beatrice I couldn't have come up with a better closing statement. You know, that is the importance of this moment. We are forced inside, whether it be in our homes or whether it be the person in the mirror. And a great deal of reflection hopefully has happened this year. And we know and we understand maybe more than ever that we need each other. And we're not going to be able to live lives of meaning, of dignity, of integrity, lives where we're able to maybe actualize without each other. And so it's been a great pleasure to kind of bask in the brilliance, even virtually, of both Maurice and Beatrice, and be guided by Letha, and to just be absolutely blown away by Moran's leather jacket as well. And so so I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. I was going to ask one question of you, Phil, and of you, Maurice, to kind of basically replicate something that Beatrice says. This is a big community that you're talking to right now. What is your ask? So if I asked you, and I start with you, Maurice, if you could channel all of the people here to help you in one of the things, what would be the ask that you would want this community to do as we click on the leave meeting in a little bit?
Okay, the one thing I would say is, like, whatever happens, like, we're days away from the US election, whatever happens, don't go back to brunch.
Phil, to you, give me your 1 minute ask for this community.
That is a good one. Don't go back to brunch, dinner. Well, you know, don't go back to normal. You cannot unsee what you've seen this year. And I would, in addition, I really put my answer right there with Maurice's, but if I can add just one more amendment, I would say each and every one of you, please spend some real time questioning your allegiance to capitalism, your allegiance to empire. We all are complicit. We live in the midst of contradictions, but I would ask you to really examine it because it is the through line through each and every issue that we're talking about today.
Beatrice, yours. Last sentence. What's your ask for this community?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with both Maurice and Phil, and just to kind of build on that, you know, cherish the uncomfortable, and I think that I come back to that a lot when it comes to change. We have this idea that somehow, you know, we'll have a great idea and everyone agrees, and then we'll all, like, you know, do the change and happy forever, and it doesn't work like that. If you're challenging power, it's really uncomfortable, and people are going to fight you very hard, and there's going to be people very upset and angry, and we just have to kind of stay there. And that comes from ourselves as well. When we get angry and upset, so when someone asks us to change, to kind of, you know, embrace that friction, because you know, if change doesn't hurt somewhere, then it's not meaningful.
Thank you all three. This was fantastic. We're trying to keep on time and maintain the flow. And when it comes to time, people sometimes use clocks, watches that kind of allow them to synchronize. I sometimes, when I work and I need to really allow myself to synchronize, I have this metronome that I have, trying to open it to demonstrate to you how it works. But basically, I work and I have this thing that kind of tells me how things work. But the reality is that none of those things is good in kind of keeping synchronized beats like our next performer, Rahzel. So those of you who have been to PopTech in the last couple of years have seen Rahzel in multiple ways. The human metronome. Rahzel Brown, one of the members of the Roots, the founding father of noise, human beatbox, many terms were used to describe him. He's going to carry us into an entertaining part as I leave the torch and stop this and give it to you to take from. Let's do it perfectly. We're going to immediately keep the beat and immediately take it to you, Rahzel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Strong J. I can't hear anyone, but it's okay.
It was amazing.
Awesome.
Yes. All right. Everybody off mute.
Yeah. Fire.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good to see everyone. Good to see everybody.
Amazing.
So I'm gonna let Rahzel carry us with a number of his performances in a second, but as soon as we're taking this to the next level, we're gonna introduce in a second Marta Mook, who you see in one of the windows, in two of the windows, in different angles. And I wanna say, before we kind of give it to the two of those to kind of take us into the musical part, that I think that for musicians, these couple of months have been particularly hard. I think that Marta's last performance was a week before the lockdown in Carnegie Hall, and I can't imagine, like, for people whose livelihood depends not just financially but also emotionally on interactions with audiences, how it has been. So this is a chance for us to also give you back the exposure and the experience of having an audience is back to you. Back to you, Rahzel, and back to you, Marta.
Yes.
I wanted to point out how nervous we were before, because Zoom essentially has this feature where one person speaking takes over the other. We did not know how it's going to work, but somehow magically those two were able to overcome the technology miracles and make it happen. Thank you so much. Marta, yours.
Yeah, thank you for having us. You know, this is all what PopTech is about, and I think this whole last 7 months have kind of been one big PopTech in a way. And that, you know, you all see my lights. This little corner of the world has become my stage. And Moran was right. I played my last live concert on March 13th. And everything else has been broadcast from my little corner of the world here. And within 2 weeks of this whole thing starting, I had to kind of totally reframe what I was doing and figured out pretty darn quick how to get a setup here, how to build my own production studio, how to do a 2-camera shoot so that people can see what I'm doing when I do workshops and master classes and concerts. And you actually would all be laughing if you saw what I have jury-rigged here. A table on top of my couch with my music stand and my old iPhone acting as my second camera. So that's how we do things here when necessity is the mother of invention. And I'll play a little bit because I think in these times, the first thing what happened was musicians, when they knew that they were going to be home, and at that point we thought maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and the first thing everybody did was just start to play concerts on Facebook and live stream. And just because we had to, because we are musicians, because we're creators, and it was food for our soul. But I can't tell you how many times I did a live stream, and I had people just, you know, stopping and, you know, thanking me for doing that. And after a few weeks, we all realized, well, now we better have to figure out how we're going to make a living out of doing this. And I have to say, I am fortunate because I do a lot of multitasking. I plug in a lot of ways. I'm teaching. I do recording sessions remotely. I do film scoring. I'm doing a workshop at Berklee College of Music in about 45 minutes, and I compose and I do a lot of other things. But I had people that the last night that we were all together on stage with the American Composers Orchestra, that was the day they shut down Broadway. We all looked around and we said, I don't know when this is the next time I'm going to see you, or you know, people that have been playing Phantom of the Opera for 30 some odd years and all of a sudden had no job and still have no job. So that's a reality check. But what I tell my students all the time is this is a time when, yes, it sucks. We didn't ask for any of this that's, you know, being put out here, but we have this, and somehow there's an opportunity. We have to find the opportunity to create something that we never would have even thought of creating before. And that's what I've been finding. And I think that's the best way to get through this, maybe the only way to get through it, as long as you have your health and, you know, can help people around you, is just to look for that. What would you not have done had this, I think it was in the chat before, had this crisis not happened? So much that we wouldn't even have thought was possible. So with that, I'm going to give you a little musical offering. I'll do a solo for like a minute. And just so you know, doing what Rahzel and I just did is basically impossible because of not only the quality of Zoom, it has to do with the quality of your internet, it has to do with latency. For him to be playing beats and for me to be playing with him, it's basically impossible. So we're kind of figuring out our way around it and how to trick you into thinking we're actually doing it. And but I'll give you an idea of, I'll play a little bit on my own and then I'll invite Rahzel to come in and we'll kind of finish it up that way.
Thank you so much. This really is bringing tears, the memories and all the kind of reminder of the journey we've been through together. I'm going to turn it back to Lita right now. It will say some final words, and I thank all of you for joining us for this. Lita, to you.
Thank you, Moran. And wow, you know, I think when I think of, this is the first time I haven't been with the whole PopTech community in 15 years. And it would have been PopTech's 24th consecutive year of getting the gang together. And you know, I have to say, this wasn't perfect, but it came pretty close. And I really would love to thank everybody. There's so many people here that have been part of this community for many years, and then a number of newcomers. So welcome to those of you who are new. Thank you to those of you that have stuck by us for many years. And I really have to give a huge thanks to Martha and Rahzel. As always, I am getting a little teary here listening to that. It's just fabulous. And I would really love to thank Phillip, Maurice, and Beatrice. So I had the wonderful opportunity to spend about an hour with them about a month ago, because I had this little idea that this would be the elixir we needed right now. It would set us all on the right path as we run up on this contentious election season. And I thought, oh, they'll never be able to do this. It'll be just like so hard to get it together. And it wasn't hard at all, because they just said, of course, it would be our honor. And I think that just speaks magnitude of the depth of their commitment to a better world. So thank the three of you for a wonderful conversation. Many thanks to Nick and Brittany and the Tech Change team who make this look really easy. If I were running this, we'd have had a bunch of problems, believe me. I would forget to unmute and all kinds of stuff. So, and of course, many thanks to Moran, who has been a partner in crime for the last 10 years of my PopTech stay. And I actually was feeling really sad last week, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I realized I was missing the idea of Moran arriving in Camden, and we were trying to get the whole program together in like one day, the behind the scenes madness. So here we are, and we'll be doing a bunch of stuff in the coming weeks. I mentioned in the chat, we have a fabulous conversation coming up with Michelle Lewis, who's here with us, and Scott Goodstein, who I think is still around. And Reverend Moose really focused on the whole notion of supporting artists and saving our stages. So many small venues are really struggling right now, and they really are the fabric of life and culture around the world. So that's coming up. We do a book reading every month or so. So lots of fun stuff. We'll put it in the PopTech newsletter and on the new PopTech website, which we owe Moran a huge debt of gratitude for, because he kind of did this in all of his spare time. So Thank you, everybody. And don't forget to watch the debate tonight if you can tolerate it. If you can't, we all understand why, but we will just hope that it all goes well, and we'll see you after the election with hopefully a little celebration of some sort. So wonderful, good evening, and good speed.
Exit music.
Exit music, right? Yeah.